Okay, and with that, we begin.
Great. So, good evening, everyone. This is the Region 7 Stakeholder Advisory Committee meeting for Tuesday, March 7th. And I'm going to go ahead and call us to order, and we'll start with announcements. And let's pause for just a minute. I just want to read through, since we have so many guests this evening, what we actually do here. So the role of the SAC, as outlined in the charter, is to play a key supporting and collaborative role by providing input and assistance in examining community challenges and opportunities related to land use, preparation of goals and strategies to implement a regional vision, and recommending changes in zoning. That's what we're here to do. So keep that in mind as we have our discussions this evening. That's what we're primarily focused on. So I'll move into announcements, and Patrick, I think you had a few things you wanted to go over.
I did. I had a couple of announcements. One,
You announce your name, so people on the phone know who you are. Please.
got it. I'm Patrick Hughes with Planning and Zoning. And first announcement, we have launched our questionnaires on the draft strategies that we worked to put together for the region. So those are online now at aacounty.org/region7. There are 5 questionnaires covering all of the 5 major topics that we grouped our strategies into. And those are going to be open to the public until April 3rd. So please help us, spread the word and have people weigh in and give us thoughts on that. I'm sorry.
Can I ask a question about that?
Yeah, go ahead.
Say your name, please.
My name is Lily Openshaw. I am on the Stakeholder Advisory Committee, but I'm also asking this question from the Bay Ridge Civic Association. Is there any way we could extend that review period? Because we're going to meet as a community to review all those strategies. And, it's complicated to get a community's comments together, and we've only been given 3 weeks. It's not enough time to meet with the communities and give the responses.
It's going to put us a little bit behind if it's going to be open until
Is it open?
April the 3rd. It was,
So it's just a matter of, we have a board meeting, we have a general meeting, and then boom, we're done with that review period. Anyway, I was asked to ask if there was any way we could have an extension. We'll definitely work within.
yeah, I'd really like to try to.
When
work
did
within
that go live?
timeframe. We,
March
yeah,
And Lily, there will be additional opportunities,
Say your name, please, so people know who's talking.
Cindy Carrier with Office of Planning and Zoning. There'll be additional opportunities for input at the planning. Well, first of all, when the whole draft comes out, and then also with Planning Advisory Board, the review
Oh,
here and
okay.
there, and before it goes to council. So
Okay, great. Thank you.
so yeah, please spread the word on those so we can get responses on the on the 5 strategies. I looked earlier today and we had, one questionnaire had 30 responses already, another one had 65. I do want to bring a second announcement that I want to make you all, the SAC, aware of an issue that has come up in the Reba area that Michael's on the South River, where Mike's Crab House is, the next door space, has applied for a license, has applied to the Maryland Sports Wagering Application Review Commission for an application to hold a sports wagering facility license. And that application was approved by the state commission to grant them the ability to do that, or to approve that application. we have started receiving a lot of comments from the residents in that area expressing a lot of concern about this. And I want to make it very clear. A lot of the responses that went to the state commission initially, they were sending residents back to the Office of Planning and Zoning, saying that it's ultimately going to be a zoning issue, whether or not this will ultimately be allowed at that location. I do want to make clear right now that the county code, it does not allow a sports rate wagering facility in that location under the current zoning of C1 for that location. So it's really essentially not an issue that the region plan is going to deal with. This is something that the county council would actually have to take up and consider a text amendment to even allow this in the county. So I don't know that there's any thinking to do that in the future, but I just wanted to go ahead and give a heads up that this is an issue that is coming up. I had called Anna to let her know because she's from the Riva area. She was well aware that this was something that was going on as well. So again, the change that Michael's needs would be a zoning text amendment. It's not a zoning map change, so it's not something that we'll be discussing in our land use and zoning discussions when we start those in the next couple of meetings. So it's just an FYI, I want to bring that to your attention. We may have some visitors here tonight who would like to say something about that, and that's fine. But just to make everybody aware that that's an issue that's out there. And that is all that I have to say right now in terms of announcements.
Great. Patrick, thank you. My name is Leo Wilson. I'm the chair of the Stakeholder Advisory Committee. This is the period in the meeting where we take public comment. And I just want to remind our guests that we're happy to hear from you and we're anxious to have you contribute input to this process at this time. Additionally, if you have more lengthy contributions you'd like to see included as we consider what we're up to, you're welcome to send those in to the Region 7 at aacounty.org website as a submission or by mail. Either one of those is fine. I'm also going to ask that everyone who chooses to speak this evening, we're going to limit that input to 2 minutes, and that's how we've done it since the beginning. So keep your comments concise. And then, as I said, if you want to elaborate on those, you're welcome to do so. We just prefer to get it in writing because we've got a lot of ground to cover tonight. And then I'm going to follow up what Patrick said. How many of you are here about the issues in Riva and the potential wagering facility? Because I was going to ask that if we wanted to talk about that, we could maybe set that aside because it's not part of our purview to deal with that issue.
Mm-hmm.
So we won't be taking that up as a group. That's not something that we can do. It's too specific to the broader Region 7 work that we're doing. So doesn't look like many people are here to talk about that. So anxious to see what everyone else wants to talk about. So if you could just put your hand up, we'll go around the room and see who wants to share. Anyone wants to add a comment at this time?
There's somebody behind.
Is this on, not on the wagering, but on just in general, on issues in general?
That's right. It's just on issues related to Region 7. So we'll start with this gentleman here. Please tell us your name.
Yeah, my name's Kevin Sullivan. I have property on Ridgely Avenue in the 500 block. And I understand that this commission is not taking into consideration that 500 block, which goes from 50 to Weems Creek. The last meeting you all had, there were several discussions about 50 to North Bestgate Road and some of the difficulties that are in that part of the county. Houses that are not lived in, houses that are in bad conditions, breaking of zoning laws already. I want to point out to you along Riverview and Ridgely Avenue in the 500 block, those same issues are occurring. Houses that haven't been lived in for 30 years. Houses that are being used as corporate headquarters. Kind of hard to build a community around those places because they're There's no one there during the day, during the night or at all. So we'd like to have that brought into your discussions. The Riverview and the Ridgely Avenue, I mean, stopping at 50 doesn't make any sense. You got a block of the county still there, and then that whole neck going down Riverview Avenue. You didn't even let us know, actually, from what I understand. I didn't know about it, and I try to stay pretty close to some of these things. I own several properties in that area. And it will be, we have things going on right now, restaurants using private property, residential property for parking lots. It's, the last time I knew it was owned by the state of Maryland, the State Highway Department. It's been cleared right next to people's backyard. They have access to our backyards now. The air in that area off of 50 now is a 10-lane highway.
We're right at 2 minutes.
Okay, and that's the only place where the Maryland Transportation did not put a sound barrier. There's towers there, there's industrial work there, there's things like that. So you gotta take that into consideration, and we hope you will.
Great. Thanks for the comment, and we will take that into consideration as we consider what we think is gonna be a good choice for that area. Thank you. You had something you wanted to say?
Go ahead, Mac. You wanna say?
Please tell us your
Brendan.
name.
Yeah, Brendan Greeley, and I'm with the Lindemore community. Until recently, for the last 25 years, I've been the voluntary harbor master there. And our concern is with the Cove of Cork. For those of you who may not know, as you're going east on Route 50 and you start to go over the Severn River, the cove is right off your left side there. Our big concerns are to maintain the peace and tranquility of the cove, as my predecessor used to say, and the good health of the cove. And so we're concerned about a couple of things. One, we've lost on, there are 4 drains, 2 on the side, either side of Route 50 that drain straight shot into the Cove of Cork. And I talked to the State Highway Department. They sent down, in effect, a hired gun who used to work for them, but then was in private practice. He said, we see no problem. And yet, every day, and you know, it's just more grease and oil and everything comes right off the highway, right into the cove. Number 2, a major concern would be if there is development and they have to, you know, there could be development up there on Ridgely and various places, you know, where is the runoff gonna go? And if a sewer system is put in, Lindemore is essentially on septic tanks. Somebody's gonna wanna put a pumping station somewhere, and as we all know in Anne Arundel County, pumping stations have a very bad track record. It's not if they're gonna fail, it's when they're gonna fail. And a failure of a pumping station at a low point in the Cove of Cork would essentially just wipe it out. So those are major concerns as you go forward and talk about development of that overall area. Our concerns are, how will they affect the Cove of Cork? So we need help on the drain runoff, which we haven't gotten, even though we tried. And we certainly are concerned about the future of pumping station and the location. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Appreciate the comment.
if you're going around, I just have one question. I don't know what you guys are talking about when you're talking about, are you talking about putting up high rises and, on a presentation I saw from the February 6th thing, there was one slide that had R40 designation, and this is R2 right now, I think. I don't know what it is right now, but I think it's similar. It must be something like that. And so when you're talking about changing the zoning, what are you talking about? Are you talking about maybe 2 houses per acre or 4 houses per acre, or are you talking about 40? I mean, this is a very small area. There's one way in, well, there's 2 ways in because you've got the old Weems Creek Bridge, but there's not a lot of room there for a whole lot of development. And so, we don't know what to ask you because we don't know what you're talking about doing. And putting apartment complexes in there, a vast majority of people that I've talked to would be dead set against that. Nobody begrudges anybody their private property and what they want to do with it. But until you tell us what you're actually thinking about doing, it's hard for us to kind of say, well, you know, we don't want that, or we do want this, or that makes sense. I mean, some people talk about bike lanes and things like that, or a coffee shop, fine, whatever. But R40, I mean, is that what you're talking about? Somebody's gotta let us in on what the whole plan is here. We can't just guess.
Right.
Can you give us your name, please? Because you didn't do that in the beginning.
Hans Kaiser, HANSKAISER.
Great.
And where do you generally live?
Generally,
Well, I mean, Gary, this gentleman said he lived in Lindemore. He didn't give a specific address. I'm not asking you to give a specific address. The other gentleman said the 500 block of Ridgely. So I'm
sorry.
figuring people
I'm a
don't want to
Lindemore, I'm a
tell us.
Lindemore.
You're Lindemore. Okay,
Since
great.
1969.
That's great. So I'm gonna pause for a minute and just respond to that, because I think it's a really good question. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
I feel like I'm kind of facing.
Is there any way you could throw a map up so we could see the area they're talking about?
I'm gonna step up front so that you can all hear me.
Okay, just make it easier.
And I don't think we need to do it myself, but.
Well, I do because I don't understand what they're talking about. And I know there's a lot of communities that have the same kind of questions about the level of detail that's being proposed, so.
Right.
And my name's Mary Guy. For transparency purposes, I think that's very important to do. Because people don't understand maps that are on the website. And my understanding is last time you all met, it was unclear what was what.
Right.
And when you talk about high density housing, that can mean low income housing, could be high rise complexes. It can be condominiums, it can be townhouses, it can be a range of things. So I think the points that are being made here are very valid. And my family owns property on North Bestgate Road, and we're very interested in what's happening here. Thank you.
Great. So I appreciate your comment as well, and we'll get to the rest of you also, but I just want to clarify something. The Stakeholder Advisory Committee is put in place as part of the planning process to look at Region 7, which is our region. That's what we're here to do, and there are several that are underway right now. And what we're trying to determine is where there's opportunity and where there are challenges in our region. So the whole idea of having a small group that looked at the Ridgely area was, hey, we weren't sure what was happening over there. There seems to be some uses that aren't consistent with the zoning code that are in place now. There seems to be potentially some opportunity for changes that would make that place a better place to live and work. And so we're just looking at what opportunities are available, which is why we had the informational meeting to hear from you. And that's why we're asking you to be here today. There is no preconceived notion about what the outcome ought to be. We're asking you to hear what you have to say about it. It's unfortunate that there's such a high level of concern and distrust about the process. And I understand because historically it has been a challenge. But in this case, all we're doing is asking questions and trying to understand. There is no preconceived notion about what those outcomes should be. Your input is a big part of it. So we hear the concerns. We know about Cova Court. We know about the traffic issues. The hope would be whatever we come to would help address those things in conjunction with whatever we needed to put in place to make it a better place to live and work. So that's what we're trying to do. There is no idea that we're trying to push forward. There's no agenda. There's nothing that you don't know that we don't know. So
Okay.
that's where we are right now.
No, I think.
Does that answer your
I
question?
might have 30 seconds left. And part of my concern is, and you know, it's honorable. I mean, the county wants to keep South County rural. I get that. But by keeping South County rural, you've got to find other pockets where there's open land that you can build on and continue building the tax base which the county's interested in. I guess our concern would be if that R40 on that slide was really a possibility, I think you'd have an uproar.
It's not. It's not.
Okay.
We're not looking at R40 for you guys over there. That's not really in the deck. I mean, we're just
We
kind of trying
don't
to.
even have a zoning district that's R40. I mean,
Well, I
just to
just
be
thought
very
it was on
clear.
the slide. That's why
Okay.
the county
That
put
was-
it out. I
That was an example of form-based code. That slide was talking about form-based code,
Okay.
and so we probably should have just blanked out
Yeah,
that
okay.
R40, but it was taken out of context in that slide. It is not meant to be a recommendation for R40.
So does that give you a
Yes.
better understanding of where we are and what we're trying to do? I mean, we're not the enemy. We're here to represent the community. We're just trying to figure out what everybody thinks will make Region 7 a better place. And we have to control growth as we move forward in a way that makes sense for everybody here. So, we're not trying to say we need to have high density in your neighborhood, like, where are the opportunities? Let's talk about it. So I'm gonna stop right there and then continue with the questions.
Are you gonna put up the map?
Where the code is, could you show
Yeah,
the
we have
code?
that. So the code is down.
Other way.
Down,
Down.
pull it down.
Other way.
That's Weed Creek.
Yeah.
Here, but this is Ridgely here.
Right. So who else over here wanted to make a comment? Go ahead.
Yeah, and I'll be less than 2 minutes. I hope I was here last time and I got to
Yes,
put
I
in my, I
remember.
got to put in my plug for the protecting the cove and not making too much traffic and so forth. But I did want to introduce myself, Dave Cordry, and Kay, who is the president of our community association in Lindemore, where I live and have lived for the past 23 years, asked me to sort of spearhead keeping up with what this group is doing and communicating that to the community. So I hope to be fairly regular coming to these so that everybody in the community doesn't have to come. And my goal, people may have a diverse views. My goal is to stick to the stuff that makes sense, that we all care about, water quality, those kinds of things, and to be fair and work with you all. So
Great. Thanks for coming and appreciate the comment.
Hi, I'm Pam Storm, and one of the areas that may be a little bit overlooked, we live directly behind the Weems Creek Medical Center. Where the White House, if you ever go to the Weems Creek Medical Center and you park in the parking lot where the White House right behind it. We're surrounded on all sides by the medical center. On one side between us and the sound barriers, there used to be a drainage field where they had dry wells there where their septic went out on that side of our house. And then on the other side is a pond. So there's three properties there right behind the medical center. And then if you go down Acorn, which parallels Route 50 and dumps you out, the very last house is Cove Court on our side. So that's just an area just to kind of bring to your attention. Our road to get to our house is between the Sons of Italy and the Weems Creek Medical Center. It's called Aiden. Go down to the bottom, veer to the right, it becomes Papel. You'll be looking dead at the sound barriers on the right-hand side. And then Acorn parallels 50 until it runs into the Severn and Cove Court. We've lived there for 26 years. I helped get some of the sound barriers going up and there, so it's kind of like, we just don't want to be stuck in the middle of a rezoning that leaves us as probably kind of forgotten, like with entrances onto Ridgely. With us being behind the medical center, do we continue to remain residential? Just don't want to get swallowed up in it, nor to be forgotten. So there's just that little area, Aiden, that's part of Apple and Acorn. So awareness. Thank you.
Great, thank
Yeah,
you.
thanks.
May I ask her?
Can you introduce yourself, please?
Certainly, Linda Dodge. My question is, the roadways that you go over to get to your property,
Yeah,
are they all county roadways or some of them community owned?
no, they're all county. Yeah, they're all county. Yeah, no problem.
Great. So is there anyone else who would like to speak this evening?
Right here.
I'm Jennifer Haythorne Wade. I live in the area south of 50, between Weems Creek and 50. And so we've got a group trying to activate the neighborhood so that you hear the voices. And I think there are two issues that you're hearing already that are just hugely a concern to us. And that is the effect of any sort of development, both on our community traffic and the flow of things, because it can get incredibly bogged down on a Friday afternoon. In the summer in particular, so we don't need more traffic if at all possible. And then the effect on the environment. And so I live on Weems Creek, and Weems Creek has really suffered from all of the environment and the development that's happened around the mall and all that area. It kind of just trickled down through the creek. And when you're talking about anything further kind of north on Ridgely Avenue, there are parts of the creek that are in that area that then come down through my property into the creek. So I think we really have to think about the environmental effects of the sediment and sewage management and all the other things if we're going to really have a long-term plan of quality density for this area.
Gotcha.
Jennifer,
Great.
can you tell me your last name, please? I didn't catch it. Yeah, not surprising. It's Haythorne Wade. Okay.
You signed in, right?
Yes, I did.
Okay,
Yes,
all
I
right,
did.
all right, thank you.
Yeah, exactly. I left the spelling there.
Great. Thank you. Appreciate the comment. Who else in the community would like to talk this evening? Go ahead.
Yes, Barbara Kearney, Lindemore resident. I would like to, I think, articulate a little bit about what you were describing in terms of the issues and concerns of the community and kind of how the dialogue initially began. I think there was not a clear description of how the hierarchy of the plan pieces fit together, that you've got the 2040 plan, and then that directs out to the individual plans. Then you've got the environmental matters plan and all of the other pieces. I think if there was a more transparent discussion about how those puzzle pieces fit together, I think the folks in the room, number one, would feel a lot more comfortable. And I think they would probably also better understand the level of vision that you're asking for now to be able to articulate and help you frame what's a good path forward for everybody that's mutually agreeable, that's a mutual consensus. You know, I mean, some of the other things, just in terms of immediate traffic, we're talking about a 2040 plus timeframe here. We all know that at least with the last administration, there's a likelihood of an additional Bay Bridge in this alignment. Route 50 is going to be a feeder. We're a choke point. How is that going to be addressed? 2040 plan, how is there going to be coordination with SAC? How is there going to be coordination with the TMDL for just basically sediment? I mean, we get the neighbor that lives that Mac was referring to, they have lost several feet of water depth at their pier due to runoff coming from those outlet pipes. So there's a lot of fine point issues, but I think if there was a better understanding of the framework, and one of the things I think that might help with some of the transparency for folks is if there was a way to at least show a listing or a map overlay or something where you've had the data points, where you've had concerns articulated, so that somebody can see, oh, yes, I was thinking about Aiden Drive, I was thinking about this, but it feels like it gets lost in the pieces and they don't know that it's top of mind and how your process is going to make those pieces dovetail together.
So I appreciate your comment. I'm not sure I can answer that right now.
I know, it was
It's pretty
an
complicated.
observation and maybe a hope to set a more constructive dialogue, because that's really what a long-range planning process should be.
Leo, can we get your name?
Barbara Kearney.
Leo, tonight, Christina Pompa with OPZ, we are going to talk about the development policy areas that come out of Plan 2040, which is the county's general development plan, as well as planned land use, which comes out of Plan 2040. And then that is what informs zoning. So I think that that relationship will be made more clear tonight as we get into the presentation. Now, some of the, you know, you're talking about the finer points on some of those things. We are still looking at a region level. So we are not going to come down into necessarily all of those specifics that you're saying, because this is just not that granular of a plan.
Well, I'm just gonna say, this is exactly Lily Openshaw again. This is exactly what every single community is really worried about. And I understand we're talking at a granular, we're not talking at a granular level, but we need to because this is how the communities understand and react to these land use plans and the pictures of 4 to 8 story buildings showing up. And so I don't know, I know what you're saying. That doesn't give my community comfort, and it certainly doesn't sound like it's giving Lindemore comfort as to when it is we're going to get to the point that we're talking at a granular level and the communities can actually feel comfortable with how we're planning for their future. That's the part that's, I think my community is struggling with that. We just wrote a 5-page response to land use letter that just showed up. So I hear what you're saying, that there's going to be times, but will it ever get granular enough that communities understand what's going on? That's the problem that I see.
Yeah. So Lily, I hear what you're saying too, and the answer is I'm not sure we're gonna get that far down into it. I just don't know. We'll have to see how the discussion goes once we finish getting the information that's being provided to us through the various organizations in the county about, you know, what might make sense and what might not make sense. I don't think we have the data in front of us yet to start that discussion, so, but I'm hopeful that we'll get through the majority of it in the next 2 meetings, is what I understand. So, to those who have concerns about the process, I encourage you to stay engaged and to keep an eye on things and to read through the Region 7 website carefully, because there is kind of a guide on how we're going to do these things in there and the steps we're going to take to make the recommendations that we'll make. Again, ours are just recommendations. We don't carry the weight to make, you know, legislative decisions and enact things. We just can make a recommendation based on the information we get. So keep an eye on us, and we're happy to be accountable and answer questions as we can. Any other questions or comments from the delegation tonight?
I have a comment, please. My name's Mary Guy. I just want to say the gentleman over here was talking about zoning violations and so forth. If you all aren't taking up zoning violations now, then what's the county going to do about all these other things once they're built? So there's no sense in moving forward with anything if the county isn't even capable of addressing current zoning violations. Thank you.
Right. So again, that's not the purview of this group.
But that can be passed on.
Well, sure.
It
The
should be.
comments will be recorded, but again, you know, we're not an enforcement agency, but I understand the concern and I think it's well placed. So we'll make sure it's included in, you know, the thoughts that go forward from Margaret. Anything else? Great. Well, thank you all for coming. Now, just so we're all clear, this process moving forward tonight is not interactive. This is really our group, and you're welcome to stay and observe and listen and take notes and ask questions at the next meeting or write them into us. But we're not opening the discussion to the public at large. We're just here to do our job. You're here to pay attention and gather what you can from it and come back to us with questions or comments post-meeting or at the beginning of the next meeting or in writing. So is everybody okay with that? Clear with that?
Can I ask one question before you proceed?
This is the last one for you.
That's
but
fine.
thank you.
This is Mary again. Are you all paid on this committee?
We are not,
If so,
everyone
okay.
here is a volunteer,
Okay, and who
everyone.
who
Well-
approves your volunteerism?
We're appointed
Or-
by, the county executive
And affirmed by the county council.
and affirmed by the county. council. Yeah, the idea is to get some diversity here to provide, touch points in the various communities, so that we make sure everyone's
What kind of
represented.
diversity are you talking about?
Diversity in terms of, people from different locations in the county,
And knowledge.
For the region.
for the region, I'm sorry, for the Region 7.
I just my name is Tony Spencer. I just wanted to add, they had a questionnaire why you thought you would be good on this, whatever commission they signed. And so if they weren't, happy with your answers, then you wouldn't be appointed, not just people would know or connected.
Yeah, Mr. Spencer is correct. There was a full application process and screening process. So, and then again, the county executive made the appointments and then the county council affirmed them through resolution.
So are those available to the public to review as well?
So we haven't touched the applications for the SACs in over a year. I'm not even sure I can answer that question because I haven't thought about it in so long.
They're not online, but the
Yeah.
list of all of the stakeholder advisory committee members is on our Region 7.
And you
site,
can read the resolutions from the county council.
And that's linked in as well.
Yeah, and there's a very brief description of each one of the members that you can look online and see who we are and what we do.
And then I just had another request to please be sure to introduce yourself when speaking. Thank you.
Yeah. So with that, I'm going to close the public comment period for the meeting. We're going to get into our formal agenda here. So we're going to start now with old business, and we have 2 sets of meeting notes to look at tonight. The first is from our immediately prior meeting, and I'm hopeful that all of our members have had a chance to take a look through those meeting notes. Let's see if we can pick one in order to start. Which one do you want to start with, Patrick?
Well, I brought it, I have a slide on the January 26th meeting. I had a follow-up on that one, if we wanted to talk about that.
Let's do that.
Okay. Jonathan had brought up a question about, his question was about something that I think Lily, you had said something about neighborhood character or something in that regard, and I went and he wanted something reflected in the notes on that front. So I went and, I'm sorry, I'm trying to get this out of the way. I went and listened back. It was at the 1 hour and 31-minute mark, and your comments were in the context of concerns about the impact of development on residential neighborhoods, and your comments were physical impacts. So you talked about setbacks, density changes, loss of light, loss of trees in residential areas, that kind of thing. I think the question was what was the comment about in terms of neighborhood character? And so I just was thinking under the discussion of the fifth strategy, I recommend adding under our first bullet, under number 5, concerns were raised about the impact that the proposed strategy may have on the physical character of residential neighborhoods. So I think if we add that in, that should address Jonathan's concern or comment. And that would be my proposal, to amend the notes to include that.
So is there a motion to accept, is there any more discussion about changing the meeting notes from that meeting, on the 26th? Is there a motion to approve the notes as corrected?
Second.
Great, all in favor? Okay, so that's gonna go. So we're gonna go ahead and put that into the record. Thank you. And then our next meeting was from February 13th. And hopefully we've all had a chance to read through those notes as well. They were lengthy. There's a lot of information covered, and we had a lot of information from the public that made it into the record here, which I think is really good. So with that, is there any discussion about the notes, any proposed amendments?
I have to abstain. I wasn't here, so I don't know how that changes your voting. Do you have enough people then?
We do.
Okay.
We do. For those of you who did have a chance to read through and attended the meeting, is there a motion to approve the meeting notes as presented?
Again, so moved.
Second? Great, so we have a second, all in favor? Okay, anybody opposed? And one abstention.
I wasn't.
Two, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, 2 abstentions. I think that's enough to carry that as an item forward. So the meeting notes will become public record and represent the discussions at that meeting. Great, thank you all. And then our next agenda item is other old business. Do we have any?
I don't have other old business. I think that's a legacy, so.
Okay, great. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and move into the presentation component of our meeting tonight, and I'll let you take the lead on that, Patrick, if that's okay.
Okay. All right. Patrick Hughes, Office of Planning and Zoning, and tonight I really want to help give you all the SAC some background information to really have in mind as you review our draft development policy area maps, planned land use maps and zoning maps over the next 2 meetings. And so this is a bit about what we're going to talk about tonight. I'll give a very brief overview of planning and zoning and then get into growth management tools. Talk about some of the ethical considerations as you all have these conversations and votes on planned land use and zoning, and then some background information to kind of keep in mind as we're reviewing the regional land use and zoning maps. So the Office of planning and zoning. This is a little bit of information that was very helpful to some of the other regions SACs, and I thought I would share this with you all as well. Our vision, briefly, it does emphasize really having a well-planned community and county and region, and really striving to balance the various interests that factor into our planning work. Our mission of the Office of Planning and Zoning is as it's written here. And this really just addresses the main functions of the various divisions in planning and zoning. This is, oh, sorry, I keep grabbing the wrong mouse. I'm trying to work with two computers here. So we have three principal divisions in planning and zoning. At the top is our planning and zoning officer. And then we have our planning division, our development division, and our zoning division. The planning division consists of three sections. You all heard from the cultural resources division, Jane Cox. She manages the historic preservation that we do. Long range planning, that's us. We work with comprehensive planning and area master plans. And then our research and GIS division, who give us supportive data and data management. Our development division focuses more on our current planning, and they're broken out into those four regions right there, or divisions. And they look at our residential development proposals, our non-residential proposals, and then we have a team that focuses on the critical area and a team that looks at transportation impacts of development proposals. And then finally, our zoning division really handles the zoning and enforcement of the zoning code.
After it's been established.
Right.
Does the development division get involved in establishing the zoning and plan land use, or is that all coming out of the planning division?
I mean, everybody works together, and they're all focused on implementing the code. The subdivision regulations are in one article of the code, and the zoning are in a different article. So typically, the development division will administer Article 17 regulations, and then the zoning division will really focus on Article 18 divisions, which is what the zoning code is.
And the region plans focus on comprehensive rezoning, which the planning division has the lead as
Okay.
staff. All of that has to go to county council for approval. There's also something called piecemeal zoning. And that is where an individual applicant can go in and prove either that the character of the neighborhood has changed or that there was a mistake in zoning. Those go through zoning administration, and then they go to the administrative hearing officer. They do not go to the county council, and they can be applied for at any time. But comprehensive zoning typically follows a comprehensive planning process like the adoption of a general development plan or a region plan.
So the critical area folks, are they somebody we can tap when we're looking at the long range planning going on right now? Because there's been a lot of concern in our area about how the critical area is impacted by some of the changes.
So both
Okay.
the development division and the zoning division have been our resource in, the staff level of review.
Okay.
Giving an overview of growth management in the county, our first growth management program was really established with the 1978 General Development Plan. And it established goals that really put most of the development in our targeted growth areas, where there's existing infrastructure, and called for providing adequate infrastructure to support the demand and the growth in those areas. It also called for protecting natural and sensitive resources, protecting South County or preserving South County as a more rural area, and then protecting the stability of our existing residential neighborhoods. And there's a bit more of this in volume 2 of Plan 2040 if you want to take a look. Some of the key guiding principles to growth management that we'll be looking to implement are making sure that we have some housing near our employment and transit areas, that we have access to various uses within our communities, multimodal options, that our entire county is not all car-based, that we have diversity in housing and affordable housing opportunities, conservation of environmental and sensitive areas, and that we really focus on opportunities for redevelopment over new greenfield development. In other words, areas that have never been developed before. Let's try to focus our development on areas that are underutilized and need redevelopment over those new areas. This is a graphic. This is also in Plan 2040 that shows how the various tools in our growth management program really work together to help shape and implement the whole program. So you'll see on this in the yellow cog is really our general development plan. That's Plan 2040. And it is kind of the centerpiece, and the other tools need to really be consistent with it. And you'll see the region plans fall here under our geographic master plan. So we have functional master plans, geographic master plans. Our regional plans will be considered amendments to this GDP once they're adopted. These are going to be policy documents with recommendations for regulations and for prioritizing capital expenditures to help implement the goals and the policy of these plans. But you'll see there are other tools that help implement our growth management program, our capital budget, adequate public facilities. All of these kind of work together to do that. A key part of the growth management plan that we're going to be working to shape over the next 2 meetings is our development policy area map, our planned land use map, and our zoning maps. So these, or at least the first 2, development policy area and planned land use, again, these are policy frameworks. And so the development policy area is broad, and it very broadly identifies where development and redevelopment are encouraged and what areas are really preserved or conserved from different types of development. Very broadly, it's not a land use map, but it does help inform the planned land use map, which is the one in the middle. That gets a little bit more granular and helps establish policies that then go to inform the zoning. And the zoning is our regulatory tool, and we're going to be making recommendations for zoning in the region that will ultimately be regulatory. And you'll see at the very bottom, there are 2 examples of how these designations play out in 2 different places. So Annapolis Mall is in the town center policy area and also in the transit oriented overlay. It has a town center planned land use, and then zoning is town center zoning, and it's also in the rural town center overlay. A completely different area, Hillsmere neighborhood, most of that area is in the peninsula, or that whole area is in the peninsula development policy area. Most of the area has low density residential land use, and that's consistent with the density there. And then R2 zoning, there is some open space zoning currently in that area.
So Patrick, can changes be made to these?
Yes.
Right now, the development policy areas as well as the plan use?
Yeah, and that's what we'll be
Designations,
tackling
because
in the next
it-
2 meetings.
It's unclear in the volume 2. It looks like the land use has already been decided.
It was adopted with Plan 2040, and
Right.
we're gonna huddle around maps over the next 2 meetings and look at areas that need to change.
Okay, and you have sent out recently a letter to all of the communities,
Not all, some.
some,
Yeah.
okay, because we
Yeah, we can, and we'll talk about those
Okay.
in more detail during the next 2 meetings to determine whether we want to, what we want to do about those potential
our
changes.
community would like to make changes to the development policy areas surrounding us, plan use
Okay,
and the zoning, so.
yeah, and so the next 2 meetings are where we're gonna go around the region
Okay,
very
and look at-
specifically. We're all gonna be huddled around the map here and talking about
Okay,
each part of the region and, yeah.
okay.
Patrick, real quick, how were those communities identified as to who would receive correspondence, such as Lily was talking?
Those are specific cases that we'll talk a little bit about. Those were some. I think Lily's case or the case of Bay Ridge was there were some areas that had preservation lands that are already under easement. And so the question was, do we want to change those from R2 to open space zoning in order to sort of strengthen that protection? Each case is a little bit different, and we'll talk about it as we're going around the map in those areas and any responses that we're getting from those communities in those areas. Okay. So starting out broad, we've talked a little bit about the development policy areas already. Again, what is the development policy area? It broadly identifies the type of development that should happen where, but it's not land use itself. We do have 5 main development policy area designations in Region 7. These are our 2 most intensive, and so you'll see the town center policy area is applied to the whole Arundel town center. And then an overlay transit oriented overlay policy area is applied within a half mile of each of those proposed transit centers, one at the mall and one at Truman Park and Ride. So those are our real growth areas or targeted areas. These are the areas that are really designated to absorb most of the growth in the region. And unlike the other regions, Region 7 really only has this one targeted area in the region. The town center is the most urban character. It's defined as a mixed use area, walkability, and then this transit oriented designation is overlaid on top of those areas that I mentioned.
So can you, I'm sorry, but can you say the gray
We don't
stuff?
have time. We really don't have time. We have so many questions of our own, but are we going to be able to talk about this? Because the transit corridor, if you want to go back, I would really like to make a case for a transit oriented overlay in Annapolis Neck Peninsula, because I think what's missing here, and I brought the city plan, is if you look at the city plan, they're proposing upzoning all the way down Forest Drive. And if you put those red opportunity zones into our county map, the way you have the rest of it, there would be a concentrated area of red down in the peninsula with no just marker to say you really need to start thinking about transit infrastructure.
So we're gonna drill down on all of that stuff, right?
Well,
now.
I know, he said that was the only area, and I just wanted to just point out to the
Currently,
committee
from
that-
Plan 2040, this is as
I know, but
adopted.
we're
in Plan
still not
2040.
figuring out how to overlay the development that the city wants to do all through the land in Region 7. So I don't know how we're gonna do that, but it's going to start impacting development policy areas. I mean, that's the first place it impacts that. We can't just keep graying out the city of Annapolis and act like nothing's happening there. They are looking at mixed use opportunities all through Forest Drive.
That's a good point. So as we're talking about what's happening in our region, you're right. We need to make sure we have we're considering what those.
I mean, there's a lot of action going on in the city
Sure.
and it's just white. So,
Fair.
okay.
Our neighborhood preservation areas, these are areas that are not really intended for substantial growth or change. These are typically more stable in character. And really the anticipation is that these would be development in these areas would be limited to infill and redevelopment that's compatible with the surrounding area. We do have a very, very small area of critical corridor designation. It's right at Route 2 along the South River, and it's really part of the Route 2 corridor that's in the Edgewater or coming up out of the Edgewater area. These are typically more auto-oriented corridors, and these typically should have investments for traffic management, multimodal mobility options, those sorts of things. And then finally, the peninsula area is our last designated area from Plan 2040, single road corridor communities. These are primarily residential. Resource conservation is very important, and also infill and redevelopment needs to be compatible with the existing built character.
Hey, Patrick, I need to ask you a question.
Mhm.
So that red area along Route 2 in Reba, I'm assuming that's Mayo Road. And to me, that hatch looks different. It looks like it's
It's Village
Village.
Center.
Okay, did you cover Village Center?
No, that's not our region.
That's.
Okay, sorry, because, okay, 'cause the black line.
Yeah.
It's very
Yeah. So
confusing.
this is our region here. So hence I'm not getting into.
Okay,
But I mean, you bring up a good point, though. There is a Village Center overlay. Has not been applied anywhere in Region 7. The definition of Village Center, and we'll talk about this as, is that an option for any areas in our Region 7 area? It's technically considered one of our targeted growth areas, but it's very specific to certain communities where any kind of growth or infill needs to be compatible with the surrounding community and with the underlying development policy area. So that may be something that we want to think about as we look at our maps and talk about development policy areas and.
So also adding, and we, heard from those communities, is the upper part of Region 7 also being included as peninsulas, because it isn't. They have the same one way in and out. I mean, what is the peninsula overlay going to do for people?
Well, this doesn't technically have that one way in, one way out.
I was thinking on the other side of 50.
50 and
over there
and Rowell Boulevard. So maybe some of these areas up
right
here
right
potentially.
that's what I was.
Yeah, we can talk about that.
Okay.
So this leads us into our planned land use map, and again, this is, sorry, I don't know how to trying to get rid of this. Well, at any rate, our planned land use helps, helps guide our development patterns. This is set from Plan 2040. It's future looking out over a 20-year time horizon. And it's really asking the question, what do we anticipate will or should occur over the next 20 years in different parts of our region? And it's based on the goals and policies of the GDP. And again, the region plan and your decisions and what council ultimately adopts will amend the general development plan. We do have this is very hard to read here, I know. This description of each land use designation is in volume 1 of Plan 2040. So please take a glance at that before our next meeting. This was put together during Plan 2040 based on an intensive land use analysis, and it was recommended to council for adoption. Council ultimately made a number of amendments to the recommended planned land use map. And there were several potential planned land use changes that were ultimately recommended for further conversation during the region plan conversation, so that more community input could be gathered. And that is what the meeting at in the Ridgely Avenue area was about. If I can advance the slide. So back during Plan 2040, we opened an application period for property owners to submit requests for a change in planned land use and to explain to us their reasoning, what their future goals were for their property, and help them or allow them to make their case for a change in planned land use. And Region 7 had 22 land use change requests, and most of those were resolved with the adoption of Plan 2040. Resolved in the sense of there was a definitive decision to either change the planned land use according to what was requested or to deny that request for any number of reasons, and the justification was reported within Plan 2040. There were 3 of those land use change requests that were referred to the region plan for further community discussion, and all of those were in that Ridgely Avenue corridor that I'm indicating there. And so this was the impetus for that discussion on February 6th in the Ridgely Avenue area. And it was really an opportunity to ask, what does the community want in terms of the future of this area? What do you see happening here? What should happen here over the next 20 years? We'll talk about this in more detail at the next meeting at March, 29th, I think is our next meeting. But in short, I will say our staff analysis of the Ridgely Avenue area and the overall need or the lack of a need for real zoning change in order to accommodate growth in the region. I don't know that our starting point is going to necessarily be recommending changing the zoning in that Ridgely Avenue corridor right now. But we're going to discuss as a committee and lay it all out, and we can have that conversation. We also
So this was changes that from the original, or this is the current? These are changed based on this map that you put out.
No,
as part of
everything in this
2040.
everything in this presentation is from Plan 2040.
So this, the map you have in volume 2.
Yeah, right.
Page.
Yeah, our GIS folks are
Okay.
still producing the maps that you all will look at that will begin to recommend some changes, and we'll talk about those kinds of changes to give you a heads up. We did open a targeted discussion around the Gate Drive and Parker Drive area, and I'm sorry I didn't include a zoom in, but this is on the south side of Bestgate Road, kind of near the mall. We talked about including those areas in the Parole Town Center, and I think also based on the community input that we've received from that area, I think we'll probably be recommending keeping those at a low, medium density residential as well. So we'll share with you all, the SAC, all of the comments that we're getting from these areas, and we'll hear from prior applicants who have applied during Plan 2040 for land use changes. And that'll be the opportunity to discuss this at these next 2 meetings. I think these 2 areas, though, I want to hit those at the next meeting. That's it on those. So then, like I said, our zoning map will follow and implement the planned land use. It is more specific than planned land use. There are more zoning categories, and it's legal. It is regulatory. So the zoning code has provisions to establish things like permitted uses and what kind of density happens, setbacks that are allowed, structure height, all of those kinds of things. And these are all laid out in Article 18, as I mentioned, of our county code. And it's important to remember that our state, the state land use article requires that the zoning map be consistent with the planned land use map. And so this is why we talk about these 2 together and in tandem. This consistency table that you absolutely can't read right here because it's so small, but it is in volume 2 of Plan 2040. It's on page 116, as noted here.
This is extremely helpful, and I would love it if, do you guys have a working copy where you actually have the policy areas and how they grow to land use and how they become zoning? Do you have your policy areas also in some kind of grid system with these guys? We don't have it all together.
Well, it doesn't, yeah, and
I know they don't exactly correspond, but they do in a lot of ways.
well, development policy area, I mean, you could have, for instance, in the neighborhood preservation area, you could have, say, a light industrial and commercial node that serves a neighborhood area, a residential neighborhood.
Well, this is good. It would be nice to put the zoning like that. This is Article 18, all that type of thing.
Yeah,
too.
yeah.
Just let me mention something real quick.
Okay.
One gentleman mentioned about the lot sizes. Someone talked about the density, Someone said runoff. I guess you meant silt when someone said runoff. So as he just explained in that 18, okay, that is what this is. Let you understand that it is being recognized as something you have to be paying attention to. Okay, all right.
Yeah, and lot sizes and such. That is zoning. That's a zoning thing. So we'll get into this over the next 2 meetings, but I'll just remind everyone, the final decision on land use and zoning, and all of the aspects of our region plans, it is ultimately, it will rest with the county council as they're adopting the plan when it goes to them.
And so that is sometime in what, end of 2023? That's phase 4.
Right.
Beginning,
Yeah. Okay.
beginning of 2024.
Okay,
All right, I'm gonna pass it over to Desiree. She's gonna talk about a little bit of the types of changes that we'll start to review with you.
Yeah, so I'm Desiree Williams with OPZ. So as Patrick was saying, our next 2 meetings are obviously going to focus on those maps. And, you know, what we've seen so far is all current zoning, it's planned land use that was adopted with Plan 2040. But at these next 2 meetings, we will have our draft zoning maps as OPZ has recommended some changes. So they're sort of proposed zoning as they're existing now before we're having our discussion. So there's been OPZ has done some analysis to essentially make planned land use consistent with zoning and kind of preempting this discussion that we're going to have. So there's been 2 main changes that you will see reflected in the updated maps, and that's what we're calling consistency changes and parcel alignment. So the consistency changes refer to, it was as part of the Plan 2040 process, the plan land use map was updated and adopted through county council. And now the zoning map needs to be updated to align with that plan land use map. And so as part of the Plan 2040 process, the staff conducted extensive analysis of land use. And there were some issues that they wanted to address, that we wanted to address during that process. One being aligning some of the currently built communities that are, say, zoned. They could be zoned for, you know, R15, but they're only built at, say, R10. So it's kind of aligning what is actually built on the ground with the zoning code. So sometimes when neighborhoods are developed, they don't always build out to the maximum potential of the zoning district. So this is sort of right sizing some of those communities that maybe were zoned. Yes, so for example, R15, but they only built out to R10. So it's sort of right sizing that zoning down to what is actually built on the ground now. And that helps with kind of right sizing our estimations for the number of people that the county is planning for roads and schools and infrastructure, because we use zoning for a lot of those calculations to estimate.
And can I add real quick,
Yeah.
where you talked about right sizing, we were applying that really to communities where we look forward in 20 years and we don't anticipate those communities changing. So a lot of those are developed communities, a townhouse community, for instance, that is maybe in reality developed at an R10, but is zoned R15. So if we can change that, that helps the calculations that water and sewer needs or other agencies use zoning for.
And also to note, those communities were notified, and when we had these examples, those were some of the communities that we did reach out to and say, are you in support of this? And so there was notification to the HOA. So that's part of it. Those actually have not been implemented yet, those changes, but those are on the table for discussion that we will consider those changes.
when are those responses due from the community?
We provided a
As
few
soon as
days,
possible.
but yeah.
It's tough, like I said, but
Yeah.
we're working on it.
Is there a listing of those communities?
Well, yeah, we can share those
That'd
as
be
we're
great.
going around this.
So how are you showing impacts of the new accessory dwelling unit bill? Because that's gonna can possibly add another unit to a lot of properties. And so if you're concerned about number of people, that's gonna be changing the character of neighborhoods in the amount of people that are in those neighborhoods, because there will be additional units, living units on these different properties. Is that, you guys have a calculation for that right now?
Yeah, I mean, if the bill's not adopted yet.
Well, it's going to be adopted this month.
I couldn't find a fiscal impact statement on that. Does anyone know if there was one?
That would be a question for the staff to the county council.
I just thought maybe,
No, it's not.
Okay, so the second kind of big, consistency change we've been looking at is the open space zoning district, which was added in 1971. The open space district generally at that time aligned with the 100-year floodplain when it was initiated. And it was mapped by FEMA in 1985. And so over time, the FEMA floodplain maps are updated, but the OS zoning district doesn't necessarily get updated. So a lot of our OS zoning areas didn't align with what was the current floodplain. So, and then since then, the county code and state and federal laws and regulations have been adopted that include more stringent protection of those water bodies or floodplains. And so there's more effective and appropriate tools for regulating floodplains than the zoning map, for example. So essentially what staff is proposing is to, where there are areas that are platted for conservation, a park or a natural area or a conservation easement, those should be specifically designated open space in the zoning. But areas that are a floodplain that was mapped, back with FEMA floodplains, those should actually be made consistent with the zoning on the rest of the parcel, and the regulation should take care of regulating the water body. So the zoning is not the tool, the regulations are the tool for regulating that. So it's basically making the open space zoning district more meaningful to what is on the ground. So and then the other change is just aligning the zoning to the parcel boundaries. So parcel boundaries change over time with subdivisions, and right now we can't make small, we end up with these kind of little slivers in ours that don't line up. The zoning doesn't line up with the parcels, and so it's cleaning those slivers up so that our zoning aligns perfectly with our parcels. We're going to go over some examples of all of these in the next slides. Oh, sorry. So this is just an example of one of the consistency changes I was just talking about, aligning the zoning with what's currently developed on the ground. This is Tidewater Colony development, and as permitted and constructed no longer aligns with the underlying R15 zoning. So we're essentially, we reached out to that community and said that, we're recommending downzoning to R10 to be consistent with the medium density residential plan land use designation. So it's essentially making that zoning designation align with what was adopted in Plan 2040. So there are some exceptions to this. This is, it's a lot of colors on this map, but the left map where it's the whole magenta area outline, it's primarily magenta and it's outlined in a dark blue line. This is the Parole Town Center planned land use area. You can see it's, that the majority of that area has a town center planned land use, that magenta color. The current zoning is the kind of brownish burgundy color is the actual town center zoning. So you can see that the whole parole growth management area is not made up of entirely town center zoning. There's a lot of other commercial, there's some industrial, mixed use, and essentially the overlay provisions in the code allow for an increased density and mix of uses in those areas that aren't necessarily zoned town center. So OPZ is recommending that this actually does not need to be aligned. We don't need town center zoning in that entire area. It's that actually the overlay provisions are taking care of that inconsistency essentially. So just to note that there are some exceptions to that consistency rule. Okay, this is an example of the floodplain and open space change I was talking about. So this area currently, the little area outlined there currently has open space zoning and was during Plan 2040 given a rural planned land use designation. And we are recommending this change to residential low density, which is all of the green, the rest of the green area is all residential low density. This one area was zoned OS because there's a floodplain here. So we are actually recommending that this change to residential low density zoning to make it consistent with the planned land use and allow the natural features to be regulated more accurately and appropriately through the development review process. So it's actually just changing that zoning to align to be one zoning designation of residential low
So
density.
the part that was zoned OS, was that, were there residences on that or?
No, I think it's a pond or a water body of some sort.
Actually, I think that does have a residence. It's divided.
Toward the street, there is a residence, yes. Mhm.
Okay. And this is an example of a planned unit development, which generally, a planned unit development uses a special exception to develop a community by blending zoning districts and uses and densities to develop a community-specific program such as parking, signage that can supersede the zoning ordinance. So it's its own little blended zoning district, basically. And this example is Riva Trace. It's just south of this building down Riva Road. So staff is not recommending zoning in existing PUDs be changed. It's just going to be noted on the zoning map. There'll be a line, I guess. I think it's just a line noting that this is a PUD and that it is a kind of special exception, I guess.
So Riva Trace is a neighborhood.
Mhm.
So basically you took that whole neighborhood and you put it under its own,
We're not changing the zoning in that neighborhood.
Yeah,
We're not recommending a change.
and what is it zoned right now? The neighborhood?
Various.
yeah.
It's
So okay, and I reviewed the whole slideshow and then I'm reading the slides and I'm like, oh, I should have added that today. So I'm gonna apologize, but
Accepted.
okay, a planned unit development, Desiree said it's a special exception. That means it has to go to the administrative hearing officer for approval and go through a special public process, okay? And what normally happens in a planned unit development is that there are multiple zoning districts and that planned unit development wants to take advantage of the density allowed by those underlying districts, but they want to blend the line. So when you look on our zoning map and you understand what the density is that was built on the ground, and you look at the areas that are, let's say, zoned R1 and R2, it doesn't make sense because you may have a denser area on the ground, but it's zoned R1. Well, it's because under that special exception for the planned unit development, all that density got blended. So staff had very rigorous discussions about these planned unit developments and what we should recommend during this process. We were concerned that if we tried to align the zoning with what density was on the ground, we may create some nonconformities. And nonconformities means that, something now does not conform to the code and, well, to the zoning code, and they can be complicated for owners. So we don't, in general, like to create non-conforming uses. So what we decided was that we would map an outline of the planned unit development so that it could explain to anybody viewing the zoning maps that there is maybe a problem that you can't explain about the density, but it is because there's a planned unit development. You have a couple of them in this region, including Heritage Harbor. Heritage Harbor is a big one. And so, you know, when you are looking at a Heritage Harbor and you're looking at all the neighborhoods, I mean, it's very difficult. So we decided not to touch the underlying zoning, but to create a designation on the maps.
So do they have HOAs? They have community associations, or how are they governing?
It depends on how old they are, how they set it up. I mean, some of them
But
can have.
all of
multiple.
these plan use unit developments have some type of association that's overseeing that boundary.
Yeah.
Okay. Are they in special community benefit districts for tax purposes? Do you know?
Not necessarily, but I mean, one of the things that, I mean, planned unit developments, one thing that they used to do, which they really don't require now in our current regulations, is that they also would provide additional amenities that the community would be responsible for. So you're talking about, do they have a HOA or community association? Absolutely, because they have a lot more common area to govern. But our regulations over the years have been stripped down a bit. And so really our planned unit development in this county now is about blending the density and not necessarily the amenity. Because the old style planned unit development may have been about increasing density. And the county's position would have been, if you want to increase the density, you project take on the amenities. We are not going to provide them all because you're getting a bump in density. So you provide more parkland in your own community.
Right.
So there's kind of been an evolution of planned unit developments in the county.
Can we go ahead and?
Yeah, sorry, I'm done.
Well, no, it's fine. We
No,
got
that's
a
helpful.
lot to get through still, and I want to make sure we get to the meat of this.
Okay, this will be quick. This is just an example of where the red lines are the parcel lines, and you can see this zoning. So the bright pink should really align with those parcel boundaries there. So we have some of this in the county where there are just these slivers. It's slightly off. It's just the nature of the parcel boundary changing over time, and then the zoning just changing every 10 years. And so we have to clean this up.
Just to eliminate the split zoning for these parcels.
Correct.
And so you'll see that when we lay out maps in the next couple of meetings. So one other thing to keep in mind as you all are talking is what is, as Lily had said, what is the city of Annapolis doing? They do have a comprehensive plan that's they're anticipating a May timeframe for public review of their comprehensive plan. Part of what they're doing is that I want us to be aware of draft areas where the city is considering annexation into the city, and that's these areas that are in yellow. So pretty much up against Route 2, there's a part in Bay Ridge and this area up Edgewood in that area. So those are just some areas that we'll just to keep in mind as we're going around our region and having our discussions. There are some state codes that outline rules surrounding rezoning once they're annexed and sort of governs potential rezonings that the city would take on over the next 5 years. So in other words, any future development over the next 5 years would need to be more or less in line or else approved. I think the county would have some say in the type of development if it's substantially different than what it was or what would have been allowed under current county zoning at the time of annexation. So it's just that these annexation areas, a thing to keep in mind as we're going around the county.
Could we sometimes see what your documents are to, how do you transfer the property for these annexations? Can we sometimes be, it seems like there's so much annexation that happened along Forest Drive, and I know I'm a broken record on this, but it seems like they got such a sweet deal because they got the land, the city got a sweet deal. And then the county's left with the roads and the infrastructure. So is there a way you can change the way those are written so they have to have a little more responsibility?
It's something that's governed by state code. And I'm not, I think the city has a larger role in it than the county in annexation.
Okay.
I do want to talk about, I think I meant to move this somewhere else in the presentation, but we're here. I wanted to talk about, just your ethical obligations and any potential conflict of interest. As you're reviewing and ultimately while we're voting on or coming to consensus on any changes to these land use and particularly zoning maps, we want to be mindful of our ethical considerations. And so anybody who has a financial interest in a property that is under discussion for a change, they need to have filed a conflict of interest form and disclose this, disclose that potential conflict of interest in order to participate in the discussion, and then should recuse themselves from a vote on that particular property. However, the full SAC may discuss and vote on the full draft plan when we reach that point, that we have the full draft plan put together. Do note, and this comes from our head of the Ethics Commission, know that the SAC's recommendations, your recommendations, they are advisory in nature, and it is ultimately the county council that will decide on and adopt the region plan. So I'm gonna race through some of this because we are running short on time.
How far over time are we gonna go? Because this is really important stuff.
Yeah, I think we can get through this. If we rush, I'm trying to get to a coworker of mine who's going to present on holding capacity. But we do have our school feeder districts. They're on open Arundel, our elementary, middle school, high schools. We have 3 middle schools and high schools that are 2 high schools that serve this area. From the educational facilities master plan that was updated in 2022. It helps guide the Board of Education's capital improvement program. There are current capacity issues at Annapolis High School, and the 2031 projection shows that there could continue to be capacity issues if there's no construction or otherwise addressing the capacity issues other than what's planned or underway. So, for example, the Hillsmere elementary improvements are taken into consideration. I will point out, of course, Eastport Elementary, which shows up later as overcapacity, but that's fully within the city of Annapolis.
But kids from the county go there, right? Or just
the feeder district is fully within the city.
Okay, but hold on with that, the understand something. The schools may be in the city, but they're all throughout the entire county or run by the county.
Right, true. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And they're looking at redistricting some of the schools now.
Yeah.
Which will become very political. So
It is.
I was on school board for 5 years. When I had county council people, people from the houses, they like to say, I don't know how you deal with that. You deal with people's kids. It's my kid. Okay. It's a very touchy area. But we have many people to speak up about what is equitable, because we have schools that Eastport is overcrowded. So is West Annapolis. Less than a mile away is Germantown, and they're underpopulated. So it's things that people don't want to talk about, but you need to face it because we're here. Okay.
Annually, the county council passes a school utilization chart that's based on enrollment of the upcoming school year, and school districts that are closed. That means approval of schools APF testing is put on hold for development proposals, is put on hold until those capacity issues are resolved, up to a maximum of 6 years. And so this was passed in January of this year. And I do have a note down here, and we've talked about this before, that there are some exemptions in the Pearl Town Center for schools testing that are based on a number of criteria for potential developments in Pearl Town Center. Things like efficiency or 1-bedroom units, no more than 2-bedroom units, those kinds of developments. And then a few other things that are required to be a part of that in order to be exempt from.
so they're exempt from that, but the reality is that they're gonna feed into those schools that are already.
Yeah,
over
but
Studies have shown not significantly. There
Yeah,
are
the
a
theory is
significant
that
number.
because they're 1 and 2 or studio and 1 bedrooms, they don't generate student count.
Mhm.
So that's why the test they're exempt from that test. I agree, there's It's
I believe
suspect,
that.
it's suspect.
It's very
but That's the
suspect.
way the code is written right now, that's the way it's done.
Well, I mean, just for zoning, but then how are we managing the increased group that's gonna show up, but that's not our thing.
Well, it did come up earlier though, as recommendations
it's a
that they not be
frustration.
allowed to be
It's a
exempt. Do you remember that
frustration.
part?
Yeah,
So
because.
part of our recommendations. were
Because
that-
I think 1 to 2 bedroom units are gonna have families. And to say they're exempt from these capacity calculations doesn't seem to make sense.
It doesn't make sense.
We agree that 2-bedroom will generate, will have families, but generally studios and 1-bedrooms do not.
I'm not generating student count.
This is the problem we have in the city. If someone from another country comes here and they have 15 people in a house that normally hold 4, but they say they're family, we can't prove they're not. Okay, that's the problem. That is a problem.
Families are renting separate bedrooms and having a common space, so that's 2 bedrooms, could be 2 families.
It could be 4 families.
That's happening.
It's happening right now, faces. And I've been retired from the fire department since '97. But I also was paramedic before that, and I dragged people's kids and grandparents out of buildings. And you're left with that scar for the rest of your life. Did I do the right thing? Did I do what I do enough? So I went from being a paramedic to fire marshal. They called me, that was mean. I was mean.
Yeah.
No way.
I just want everyone to remember that we've been through our list of recommendations that we finalized, and one of the recommendations we made is that, you know, we had suggestions that they not be held exempt or kept in an exempt.
Oh, good. It got through.
I mean, it's in our list.
Survived.
So, well, I think it's in
Some of the
there.
affordable housing strategies that we stripped out some of those provisions from our affordable housing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Okay, great.
this is ground we've covered a little.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Just- those
I just wanted to
numbers make
remind
me
people, because I want
nervous.
people to know.
Okay, we'll just briefly cover sewer capacity. So the Annapolis sewer service area covers the entirety of Region 7, with the exception of a small area in Riva that's not planned for sewer service. It's outside of it's in the rural service area, but the rest of the region is either already served by public sewer or is in a future or a planned service area for sewer. Future meaning that there would have to be significant upgrades to ever be served. So the distinction between future and planned is significant. Planned service area, meaning that there is capacity to serve that area, and public utilities, if the redevelopment or development was to occur in that area, would need to be connected. In a future service area, I'm getting in the weeds here, but we can go to the gist is that basically in our existing and planned service area, there is plenty of capacity looking out to year 2050. And this is based on our current zoning, what's projected growth wise for this area. So the Annapolis sewer service area for the planned and existing areas have adequate capacity.
And did you guys do an impact study for the ADUs? To see how they're gonna impact the sewer?
No, so the ADU legislation has just come through, it has been introduced through council, so that's not something
But
we
did
haven't
you
done
have to
anything
do
yet
a-
for.
Well, it wouldn't
They
have
will
been
now.
us and.
Because they've allowed now separate living facility, I mean,
Well, they
it's
haven't- they haven't
basically
allowed
a
it.
unit.
What happens is the legislation is proposed and then it goes into study for different groups to say, what's the impact of it? So I don't think it's.
Well, I think the impacts go to county council when they look at voting for it.
Right, but I don't
Did-
think that's.
What, there was any comment made about this kind of capacity issue? When the
So
ADU,
the people who follow legislation for the Office of Planning and Zoning are in our zoning division, and we don't have a single one of them in this room. So we can't give you any information on that.
And along those lines, and public, please hear this, no matter what we plan here, politics still plays its role after this is recommended.
Right, they'll put it in.
And that has nothing to do with us. Okay, we made our recommendations, but it's still, things are not in our hands. Beyond that point.
And Lily, DPW is the agency that.
no, I know that, but do they give you guys any information? We're planning the future here. for the next 20 years, so I.
With our currently, yes,
Yes.
but not on proposed legislation.
Ask, what's an ADU? I don't know that term.
It's an accessory dwelling unit. It's where people can have a second dwelling unit on a single family or sometimes a multifamily residence to provide housing for maybe family members, the elderly, and you know, it's supposed to alleviate housing issues to some extent.
And it's a terrific program. I'm not against the program. I just want to make sure that everybody's thinking about all the impacts that kind of development has on.
Right. Historically, those ADU legislations that have been enacted in other communities have had a minimal impact on density. Minimal.
Well, but this current legislation, it relieves there's also typically a lot more restrictions on the ADUs than this current legislation. Again, which is fine, as long as we're planning for the infrastructure.
Mhm.
And that's where I just want to know that infrastructure conversation is being had. And it's not, so.
Okay, so just to close this sewer capacity part, so these are, I mentioned there's a planned service area and a future service area, so. And an existing service area, so the area that's showing under our region 7. That does not have a hatching over it is generally existing service areas. Areas that have kind of a diagonal line are considered future service. And then the areas that have the straight hatching are the planned service areas. So you can see there are, I mean, the area up in, you know, Ridgely and Lindmore in that area is in the future service, meaning that it is not planned to be, there's not currently planned service for that area, that significant upgrades would have to be made in order to serve that area. So the analysis that I was referring to previously is talking about the planned service and the existing service area.
And what I'd like to do now is turn it over to Spencer Shanholz. Spencer, are you still with us?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Great, yeah, we can hear you. And Spencer's going to give you an overview of our holding capacity analysis, which will help influence our mapping and our decisions.
My name is Spencer Shanholz. I'm with Long Range Planning and the Office of Planning and Zoning, just with my other colleagues there. So the holding capacity analysis is something that we in Long Range Planning do in cooperation with our GIS and research team. And basically, it provides an estimate of the number of additional housing units that could be built under existing zoning code and the development regulations that go along with those. You might have heard of this as a build-out analysis or a residential development capacity analysis, but we call it a holding capacity in our case. And the results that we come out of this are used to support our long-range planning for land use, roads, infrastructure, and rec and parks. The process that I'm going to go through to show you how we get to these numbers, they follow guidance from the Maryland Department of Planning, and we also look at best practices from other jurisdictions. And we take into account zoning, development regulations, regulated features, and current land values. So an important caveat in these is that it provides an estimated number of residential units, but it's not really parcel specific, a parcel specific study or a guarantee that development could or would occur. We're just really looking at the maximum that could happen under the current situations. Obviously, things change. Next slide, please. So the important steps in this are to identify parcels that have development potential. We then look back in the past 5 years and look at the yields of recent developments in each zone. We then apply that density, that yield, to the developable parcels. And then we can compare these numbers that we come up with growth forecasts and infrastructure capacity to kind of see where we are. Right, next slide. So first, in identifying properties that can be developed, we look at, first of all, vacant land. Then we look at properties, parcels that might have redevelopment potential. And this is just an estimate, and it looks at the assessed value of improvements assessed value of improvements less than the assessed value of land. So an example there is that a property could have an assessed land value of $1 million, but the improvements on that land are only about 100,000. So just kind of simple real estate economics would show that that property has some potential for redevelopment to a general higher value. And again, this is not the same as a feasibility study or market analysis. It's just kind of a basic measure that we can use in this model. So then we look at also subdivision potential. So we look at potential for parcels that are in residential districts that have a larger lot size that are more than double the minimum lot size. So therefore that they could have the potential to subdivide and create one more unit. So properties that we take out of the analysis are any that are owned by federal government, state or local government, assuming that those will not be developed into residences. Those recorded on subdivision plats or open space or floodplain parcels. Those recorded by conservation easements, so those cannot be developed on. And then those that are currently in the subdivision review process. So any pipeline projects, any parcels that have something proposed on it, we're not gonna take that into account. So then the next step is we're looking at all the residential zoning districts, and then any other zoning district where residential use could be allowed by right or as a conditional use. So some of the C1, C2, C3 in the case of this region, and then the mixed use regions can and the town center can allow some residential by right. So we look back at the past 5 years, and we take an average and look at all of the developments that have occurred, and we come up with a yield factor for each zoning district. So the yield factor provides a lower, more conservative estimate than, so, you say R2, we're going to have 2 units. What is the actual average that type of zone actually develops at? So our yield factors are typically lower than your 15 for an R15 or as such, So then basically when we get these numbers, we can take these and we can use them to inform our land use decisions, zoning decisions, and really how should the county change zoning or direct public investments to support different types of development. And I'll say this again, I'm going to show the holding capacity analysis, the basic numbers, and then also some population and household forecasts. They're really not directly comparable to each other, and they're not based on each other at all. We're really comparing apples to oranges, but it does give us a sense of what might be needed and what we have the capacity to build out at the current adopted zoning. So next slide. So this is the results for our holding capacity analysis for Region 7 and countywide. So I'll walk through the first line. This is actually a household forecast number. The change in number of households we expect to increase between 2020 and 2040. And these are based on the Baltimore Metropolitan Council, BMC forecast. We take their forecast that they do, and that's kind of what the county bases that off of. The next 2 lines are holding capacity results. So in all the residential zoning districts, we can expect an additional 717 units built if all of those residential zones were built out at max zones. The next line looks at non-residential zoning districts, and that's a larger number. You can see it's about 3,600 if it was built out, and predominantly most of those are going to be in your town center. In parole there. So then we take our, the total holding capacities, those 2 together, and we can kind of take the difference. And we see that we have a surplus of housing units. So the household forecast that we're going to grow about, 1,500 households. And we have the capacity right now to build out to around 4,400. Giving us a surplus of about 3,000. So that this is just one input into your decision process. It's just a model. You can kind of take this with a grain of salt, but it just gives you an idea as you're moving forward. And I'll turn it back over to Patrick now.
Go ahead.
Did you run those calculations with the city of Annapolis developments on Forest Drive? Because there's about 600 units coming.
No, because this is informing county zoning. And
Well,
so
I know,
we-
but county and zoning impacts public investments, and the county has to do the public investments for Forest Drive. right?
We only looked at the region within the county portion of the region, because those are these numbers, we're using them to inform our land use and zoning.
But also our
decisions here.
public investments. Our investments in public infrastructure.
Yeah.
Right?
So we do have projected households for the city, yes,
Okay.
but we have not run the holding capacity analysis for the city. That's something the city would have to.
I know, but could we run an analysis where we combine the city projections with the county for our particular area, since it's part of our area?
It'd be a
Lily,
completely
we could not do that. We don't have the city's data to do
But
that.
we can get you the city data though.
Yeah, but even that is not, I don't even know if it would be apples to apples.
Well, I'm just saying, isn't the county looking at the public infrastructure projections? And isn't the county responsible for the road capacity, transit development that includes includes city?
Yeah, and yes,
So
and
how can
we did look at.
How can we be planning for that if we don't put those numbers together?
This holding capacity informs our zoning.
Well, he said also public investments. Right? So part of planning is capital improvement planning.
Yes.
So how can you plan the capital improvement planning if you don't take the city's numbers into account somewhere in this process?
But that's a completely different process, Lily. I mean, that's
Well,
not,
when does that happen? Because I hear about public investments, but the reality is on Forest Drive, it's red, it's developments from the city of Annapolis, but if you look at the county, it looks like nothing's going on down here, but that's not the case. A lot's going on.
Do you have that data, what the city's projections are now?
Yeah, I have it in their draft plan.
Yeah, okay. So I'm gonna recommend that we look at that when we're looking at what's happening on the Forest Drive area of Region 7 and just taking into account this.
Just try to take those numbers and just see.
I understand. I mean,
I appreciate that.
it's the same problem that we've seen over and over again. You know, town center is using capacity that is in the city too, right? So there's development that the county is allowing without applying APF test,
Right,
right?
yes.
So it's a two-way street. There's
Yes.
places where the city is the beneficiary, and there's places where the county is the beneficiary.
Okay.
So I think what you're asking is, can we look at both of those at the same time?
We do it like offline.
Yeah,
just-
well, we can do it when we're
Okay.
looking at the maps and say, hey, this is what we know about where it's happening, and we should be thinking about those things. So I
Thank
think
you.
that makes a
Yeah.
lot of sense. I don't think it's that hard to do.
Yeah. And very quickly, I wanted to give a snapshot, of our, these are just a quick snapshot of kind of the major pipeline and the major projects that are under construction. A lot of these are things that you are seeing going on currently, and you'll see that a lot of these are some of the ones that are coming in on Riva Road now. So all of these that are indicated, are they in the targeted growth area? Yes, it means that they are in the Parole Town Center. So this looks back over the last 5 years roughly. This is not a complete list, so we're not looking, I didn't include, small subdivisions, a lot that divides into 2 single-family homes. I didn't include things of that nature. But it is just a snapshot of some of our recent development proposals and, where they're happening.
So Patrick, the Ginger Cove expansion, that is adjacent to the River Road PUD, right?
But it's outside of the Pearl Town Center. It's in the River Trace area.
I said River Road, I meant River Trace, thank you.
Yeah.
So just a quick look at the numbers there. I mean, it's over 1,000 units easily right there. So we're talking about growth projections that were around 1,500 in the county through 2040, and there's 1,000 of them right there. So, I mean,
Well, and some of these, I'm sorry, some of these would have been included in the holding capacity, so.
oh, okay.
Not,
okay.
not included would have been the 179 Jennifer Road and the Orville Bowen proposal, because those are very recent, and so those would not have been included in the holding capacity.
I understand. Okay, so it's not that delta, it's less than that.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
So 520.
Mhm.
Right, so you're looking at 1,000 over the next 20 years, 15 years.
And Spencer touched on this a little bit, but we can bring this kind of mapping as well, because it is another tool for consideration. That comparing the land, the value of land improvements to land value may indicate areas of potential redevelopment that we want to think about. But it is, I think, mostly applicable to non-residential areas. Sometimes when you get into these residential areas, you might see that waterfront homes are often, the improvements are, the land value is way above the actual improvement. And so it's not as good for residential, but for non-residential areas, this may be a good thing to look at as well. That's it. We wanted to share this background information with you all, things to keep in mind as we're going through our land use and zoning discussions over the next couple of meetings. So our next steps, we are going to distribute to you all the draft planned land use and zoning, and that should say also development policy area, because we will propose some changes to those. In the meantime, if you all would spread the word about our strategies and make sure that we get public input on those. We're gonna send this to you and some other links for you all to have a look at before the next meeting. And we will send you our draft maps for you to have a look at before the next meeting. Our next meeting is March 29th, and also the April 13th meeting. I've noted those on the bottom. Those are going to be in person only, just because of the nature of these discussions. We're going to push these tables together. We're going to lay the maps out, and we're going to be all in a group talking and pointing and such. So there's not going to be an easy way really to attend virtually. So I do want to encourage everybody to attend in person for those discussions. And that's it. Oh, one thing I will say too is we will be packaging and sharing with you all comments that we're getting from the public on any of these areas, and particularly the Ridgely area and the Parker Drive area, just so that you have that as well as we're talking about those areas. That's it. Is there anything that I've left out that you can think of, or you, Leah?
No, I just wanted to make a comment because I think Lily's point's well taken, and from the guests that are here tonight, it all doesn't fit into a nice neat box. There's a lot of pieces that, kind of have the potential to fall through the cracks, and I understand that, and I think the group understands that, but as we look at the map and we think about what might be a reasonable change for different areas, we'll be thinking about the areas that you're talking to us about. And we'll be thinking about, what happens if the traffic goes up there and there isn't some other mediation to try and address those things. And if we do things in these areas, what happens to the environment? And are we asking people who want to have benefit with growth with the responsibility to take care of the impacts that they have, and maybe look at the impacts that are there now and how we can start to correct those. So we're hearing you, and I think it's a good point. And Lily, I understand yours too, with the city-county relationship and what happens on Forest Drive. It is a challenge, and I don't think we should just say it's not our problem, because it is our problem, because we all live here. So, and you live where you live, and we get that. So I just wanted to make sure you're understanding that that's what I think we ought to be doing as a group, and that's what I'm going to try and lead us to take into account as we go through this. So, any other comments from the group?
Well, I do want to bring up something that is a concern to me, because I am on the safety committee for the Forest Drive corridor, which I think is a great project, and I really appreciate the county doing that. But what's coming up is some of the numbers that were projected for traffic volumes for 2040. were 60 to 65,000 daily traffic volume up around Chinkapin Run Road. And they did a traffic count this past year, so we're just rolling out of COVID. A lot of people are still working from home. They're already hitting 58,000. And that's 2023. We were supposed to hit 60,000 2040 or 2035. So we're 12 years ahead of the congestion that they were projecting from VMC. So I'm concerned about the modeling that's going, because it's growing, our traffic volumes are growing at a higher rate than were projected just 5 years ago. These are 2017, 2018 calculations. And we're already seeing that they're off a little. So I don't know what statistical modeling is being done. But maybe our population should be, our area should be looked at differently. I don't know how VMC does their regional populations they use for their statistics, but we're different. I hate to say that, but it seems like we're different because we're growing faster than they're projecting, even with the COVID impacts.
Gotta take it back about 40 years. When I was in the Annapolis.
And you're a baby, right?
I was 13. But we were looking at diversity and diversity training, and we were looking at how things are going to grow. First of all, with the computer, this in the next 10 years, it was the next 3 years.
Right.
It was larger than they
I know.
anticipated. Then they said there were 130 some different nationalities in California. It would be this amount of years before they would get here. They were already here.
Mhm.
They were already
Yeah,
here.
I don't know.
So
how
we're
we-
behind our own count while we're saying we're going forward. So that has to be looked at. But the thing is, I just want the public to hear that what we are supposed to do, or commissioned to do, it's not the right word, but I'm gonna say commission, it's all we can do. Some things are above our heads, and some things are after we've given our recommendations. And so please understand that, so you won't go, when someone will tell you that they lied to you, no, they didn't. Well, I've heard someone come in the door tonight and they had misinformation. Misinformation is so damaging.
Mhm.
It's so damaging. I'm glad you all came to hear for yourselves. Come back. But don't accept something that's contrary to what we've said. Come and hear it for yourself. I want you to go back to the persons who said this and they were lying. Because sometimes people will do that. Now, I'm not holding Leo. I'm not holding you responsible. Tony Spencer saying this. Sometimes people will lie to you for their own benefit. Come please and hear for yourself. Because I think tonight you've learned something. You heard some things. You asked your questions. Okay. And hopefully you got some answers and believe now that we are trying to do the best job we have. That's why we wanted to be on here. I'm finished.
Great. Well, thanks, Tony. Appreciate the comment. With that, I'm gonna go ahead and adjourn us. I don't think I need to make a motion to adjourn us. I think I can just do it. I guess Linda, that's okay. Is that right?
On my board.
My Robert's order.
On my board.
Yeah, but you're so helpful when it comes to me, making sure I'm not running afoul of our rules. So thanks for coming, everyone. And we'll look forward to seeing you next month.
Later this month,
Later this month, my mistake.